You think you chose it because it made sense. But what if I could change your answer without changing either option? Put an absurd request before a reasonable one. Let someone help you before they ask for a favor. Give one opinion a head start, and a crowd can begin building its own evidence. These patterns do not control you, but when your own evidence is thin, they can tilt what feels sensible. We are counting down from the easiest to notice to the hardest. The first three change the stage. The final three change what your mind treats as evidence. And number one happens after the decision seems finished. Number 6. The first frame sets the ruler. In 1975, Robert Cialdini and his colleagues approached students with a spectacularly bad offer. Volunteer 2 hours every week, unpaid, for at least 2 years counseling juvenile offenders. Nobody agreed. Then came a smaller request: supervise 1 2-hour trip to the zoo. When students heard only the zoo request, about 17% said yes. When it followed the 2-year request, 50% agreed. Same zoo, same 2 hours, roughly 3 times the agreement. The first request moved the ruler, and because the requester appeared to retreat, the smaller ask could feel like a concession. The option stayed still. The frame moved. Number 5. The invisible bill. A coworker brings you a coffee you never asked for. Later, they need help finishing a task. The coffee is still a drink, but inside the relationship, it can also become a tiny invoice. Experiments have found that unsolicited favors can increase later compliance, even when liking does not fully explain it. That does not make kindness manipulation. Reciprocity is one reason cooperation works. The risk begins when gratitude changes the question from, "Is this wise?" to, "What kind of person would refuse?" The favor did not prove the request was good. It only made no feel more expensive. Number 4. The crowd writes the score. Imagine 2 identical comments. One receives a single artificial upvote before anyone else arrives. The other begins at 0. In 2013, Lev Muchnik, Sinan Errol, and Sean Taylor tested this across more than 100,000 online comments. One early upvote made the next rating 32% more likely to be positive. Final scores ended about 25% higher on average. One click, different crowd. Later voters used visible social information as evidence. That works until an apparently independent crowd is partly inheriting its confidence from one early signal. So far, the frame, the favor, and the crowd all change the stage around the choice. Which catches you most often? 6, 5, or 4? Put the number in the comments. Not as a diagnosis, just as a mirror. Because the final 3 do something harder to notice. They change what feels like evidence. Number 3. Confidence becomes borrowed evidence. Picture a meeting where 2 people know equally little. The first says, "I may be wrong, but here is what the data suggests." The second answers immediately. Clean voice, total certainty. Who does the room turn toward? In group studies, overconfident participants sometimes gained status because they spoke more and displayed stronger competence cues. That does not mean confidence is fake. It means confidence is easy to see, while competence takes time to verify. Confidence is visible. Competence still needs checking. Number 2. A prediction builds the road. A manager decides one employee is the reliable one. That employee gets the important assignment, more feedback, more patience after mistakes, more chances to practice under pressure. Months later, performance improves. "I knew it," the manager says. But the prediction did not merely observe the road, it helped pave it. Psychologists Lee Jussum and Kent Harbor reviewed decades of teacher expectation research. Expectations do not magically create any future. Effects are often modest. But expectations can become partly self-fulfilling when they change treatment, opportunity, feedback, or persistence. The same loop can run inside you. "I freeze when people watch me" leads to avoidance. Avoidance removes practice. The next attempt feels harder. Then the difficulty returns as evidence that the label was right. The prediction did not see the future. It trained one version of it. Number 1. The narrator arrives late. Imagine choosing the more attractive face from 2 photographs. You point to one. Then the researcher secretly hands you the face you rejected and asks, "Why did you choose this one?" Petter Johansson and his colleagues used a card trick to do exactly that. Most switches were not detected immediately, yet participants still gave detailed, sincere reasons for the face now in their hand. They were not necessarily lying. The mind had incomplete logs and still had to finish the report. That is what makes number 1 unsettling. The explanation may feel honest because it is honest. It may simply be a reconstruction built after some real inputs have faded. Sometimes the reason is sincere. It just arrived late. These 6 patterns collapse into 4 larger engines. Context changes what the option is compared with. People add obligation, social proof, and visible confidence. Expectation changes which path receives practice and opportunity. Story compresses the past into a reason that guides the next choice. They're not literal brain modules. They're a map for asking where the evidence came from. Return to a project you agreed to this morning. A ridiculous request made the smaller one feel harmless. Earlier help made refusal costly. Others had approved it. The most confident voice made doubt feel unnecessary. Someone called you dependable, and yes matched the person you wanted to be. Later, those signals faded. One sentence remained. I chose it because it suited me. Maybe it did. The point is not that 6 patterns controlled you. They shifted the odds, while the final explanation remembered only a few of them. After the choice, you may replay how you looked. The pause before you answered. The awkward sentence everyone supposedly noticed. But spotlight effect experiments repeatedly find that people often overestimate how much others notice their appearance or behavior. The audience inside your head can be much larger than the audience outside it. Most people are not studying your performance. They are busy replaying their own. So you may not need to defend every imperfect choice, explain every pause, or keep performing for an audience that has moved on. You are watched less closely than you fear, and influenced more quietly than you realize. That sounds unsettling. It is also freedom. Because once a cue becomes visible, it loses the right to call itself destiny. Agency begins when the cue stops pretending to be evidence.